with a good product manager, which now thankfully I've been able to do twice in my career. Once right now at Humu, we have some great product managers. Like good product managers are worth their weight in gold, and they will help your engineering team on so many dimensions. It will help the whole company on so many dimensions. Working with a bad PM, it feels like kind of like wasted effort, and that's I think where you sometimes get into that like, wait, we're having to make all these decisions anyway, and like all these different pieces. So I think
Right.
kind of fleshing out
The
where
boundaries.
the boundaries are,
Yeah, I'm
and
with you.
how in a highly functioning team you get synergies between design, engineering, marketing, like all these different dimensions, might be worth doing. Because I don't know, but I've talked with quite a few engineers who have a pretty negative impression of product management, and I think it comes from having never worked with a great product manager.
Yeah. And I think the
That's
answer
a
to that
great
is different too on different teams because
Hmm.
that relationship that you have really depends on the individuals involved. So at least that's how I like to work, that folks,
Yeah, no, that
know each other's strengths and
100%.
stuff.
But yeah,
Yeah.
let's. So I want to make
All
sure
right.
we
Well,
have
yeah.
time to go into that. But that might be a good part of like segment two, of
Segment
like,
two or segment one? Okay. Segment. I just moved.
or late, either late segment one,
Like
like
one.
late
I was thinking
segment
late
one as
segment
we.
one or early.
Yeah. But
Okay. Perfect.
also
Sorry to
like
interrupt.
let's just roll and improvise and be good. I know
Yeah. Yeah. We're good.
y'all are planners. I'm not a planner, so well,
Actually, I'm not the planner here. Liana's the planner. Thank you very
Mhm.
much. The only reason why even this, like I have put together this many notes is because I'm like, I wanted to make Liana the planner feel comfortable. Like,
Thank you. I appreciate
so
that.
Liana the planner for it. So anyways, I think we're live on YouTube, everybody. Say hello to the internet. So Liana, we live stream the show on YouTube, but obviously YouTube is not the primary, like
Oh, good
the
to
show
know.
gets
Hey,
held.
honey, we're live, so don't interrupt too, sweetheart.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, yeah. Also, yeah, if you happen to be like working from home, wearing like, shorts for or like underwear for pants, like, just
Yeah,
keep that
I
in mind
won't
as
get
you're
up.
getting up. I may be wearing underwear for pants right
Nobody's
now.
looking
I'm
at home.
Oh, anyways, okay, so, all right, so folks, so Liana, I'm gonna kick off the intro music and we'll start. Ready? All right. Let me look. Hope you're doing well. Super excited about today's show. We're going to be talking about a really important for software engineers who want to be happy at work. We're joined by my lovely former coworker, Liana Leahy. Actually, Liana, I always mispronounce your name. How do I
Well,
pronounce your
I
last
mean,
name?
the family says Leahy, but it's an Irish name and it should be pronounced Leahy. So we pronounce it wrong, too. So whatevs.
All right. Well, Liana Leahy, Liana Awesome. That could be your last name because I think
Oh,
you're
there you go.
awesome.
That's okay.
So Liana's a product manager at Indigo, and on is KBall. Welcome, KBall.
hello, hello. Nobody has trouble pronouncing my last name, though. I have had people ask, "Wait, how do you spell that?" I'm like, "Ball, like a basketball, like Ball," but people still struggle.
Oh, that's so funny. I mean that like I would never have guessed that you have issues with your name because you have like a really common first name, Kevin, and then your last name is literally like used in the English language. So
People just can't believe it could be that easy.
yeah, right, exactly. Those people might be engineers, right?
Yeah, I mean,
What's the twist?
we're familiar with engineers, right? You want to put all the fun complexity in there. We'll build our static site with React and
Oh my god, I feel attacked. Anyways, so so excited to have you. So
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
yeah, we're going to be talking about your transition from engineering into products. You were like this principal level senior engineer that made into product many years ago. And I think even before that, at some point, you were singing Broadway, which like I really want to hear that story. So, in your own words, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, I mean, I to start with the Broadway spin. I grew up in a family where my father was in music. He was a jazz pianist and used to gig in Manhattan and the Catskills and stuff. And my mom was a very fast typist, and so she ended up becoming a key punch operator in the 80s. And she was debugging mainframes and stuff like that. So, I mean, only naturally did I major in both computers and musical theater. So, I always had the idea that, I mean, my dad had a day job, and gigged on the side, so I just always figured that that was what my life would be. So I was doing computers, what we said in the day. Um, I was programming in Manhattan during the day, and then auditioning, in the right before work, because you got up at 5 in the morning to go to a cattle call, go to work, and then like be at rehearsals and stuff at night. So it was a fun time. Um, yeah, I loved it. I was doing off Broadway, off Broadway. I did a regional tour, good time, and then I turned 30 and went, okay, thanks, I'm done with that. I want to actually settle down and have a family and a real life. So then I started to work in computers in earnest. So that meant transitioning from desktop development, because now I'm dating myself, to web technologies. Spent a lot of time doing that, and yeah, then I was doing Ruby on Rails for a number of years, and that was really great. But yeah, I've been doing software for many years before I actually landed at a startup that had formalized the role of product manager. I'd never seen that before. I was like, oh, what is this? This is cool. This is my job. I've been doing this all along. I had no idea. Like I had always been that person who was the glue. I think there's a couple blog posts about being the glue person. That one who likes to be the liaison between development and the business, and talking to everybody. I was a very social person, so I'd always been that person who was writing requirements and trying to understand what the business really wanted. It's like, really, you want this? Are you sure? It's going to take a long time. If we just did this little tweak, it'd be a lot faster. Oh, awesome, right? So it was just a natural progression into product management. So when I reached out to my folks at the company that I'd really like to make this transition, they were like, great, mentored me, and then I was on the path. But we can talk more about that as we go along.
Wow.
Working
So
in
that's
computers
That was a
or with
mouthful.
computers is such a great day job, right? Like it's way better than waiting tables. I know so many people who are in performing arts of some form or another that use software as like, that's how I pay the bills, and then I do my thing.
Yeah, I was really at the time. I mean, there wasn't a lot of computer scientists in theater. I'm sure there's more now, but back then, it was just me, and it was great. I could pay for my acting classes and my headshots, and being an actor is expensive, so it was very helpful.
Yeah, I like to see that be normalized where tech is not something that's like your full-time passion, right? Because I feel like people have the opposite mentality where they feel like in order to be successful in tech, you have to be this like super passionate engineer and you have to live and breathe this stuff. Like it's perfectly fine to normalize and say, hey, this is a lucrative industry and a high-paying job, and you can use this to help fund your maybe perhaps less lucrative passion. So yeah, that's
I love computer science. I miss programming. I love it. I wouldn't say that I wasn't passionate or I'm not passionate about
Mhm.
it. I just have multiple passions.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. I think multiple passions and this not being the dominant one. So yeah, I've got a pinned tweet on that. And speaking of glue person, your whole concept of being a glue person true, I think, as a product manager, but I think even engineering org, I feel like there's glue people with many different like are the folks that know where all the bodies are buried, who's good at what, they're the ones that can redirect you to the right person. And so I'm curious, like what kind of really was the catalyst for you making that product? Like when did you realize like this was something that you maybe were more
Yeah, I mean, I had done software for a while, and I guess I just needed a different challenge. And when I saw this role, and the way that it was done, it just seemed exciting to me to formally, as not to have that as a job as opposed to just doing it as as an engineer, right? Because it does suck up a lot of your time when you're that glue person, to spend time like making those connections and talking to people and understanding the business. It's all valuable work, and I know that a lot of engineers do that today, but when you have someone whose job it is to do that work, it leaves you free time to actually do, actually do the programming. So that's like where I think product management like has can help out engineers and is like really important. And I just hadn't seen that before. It was always on the tech staff to try and figure out what is it that the business wanted, and they didn't really tell me why they wanted something. They were always handing us solutions like go build this thing, and we would just kind of like, okay, just kind of guess, and then it wouldn't be the right thing, or it'd be like super waterfall and you spend months like planning something out, and then of course by the time it was built they didn't need that thing anymore. It's just not an awesome way of creating software. So so that was why I was being that person who was trying to make those connections, because I didn't like build, no one likes building something that no one's going to use, right? I want to build something that's useful, that is going to work, and people are going to be happy with. So that's why I was going to the business going, why am I building this thing? What do you want it for? Who's using this? And asking those types of questions, which are very product management questions.
Can we maybe divert a little bit and just kind of flesh out for folks what exactly we mean when we talk about like product manager work, product manager types of things, the product manager role? Because I feel like many engineers have never worked with a product manager, or at least have never worked with a product manager who was actually good at their job and making things easy for the engineering team.
Sure. I mean, it's a tough and challenging gig. There's a lot to do. You need to understand your industry and your company, and you need to know your users. I mean, that's number one. Who are your users? And if you're in a company that makes software for everyone, like Facebook, right? Like, it gets a little harder. Or I worked at the MBTA for a while, which everyone rides the T. So who's your user? Like getting to really understand the jobs to be done is one of the frameworks that we use. Like, what is it that the user's trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish with your product? And understanding that need and that niche that you're trying to fill with your product, super important. Also, as a PM, you're aligning stakeholders around the vision. So you have to have a real good picture in your mind and be able to communicate that picture of what you're building, and not just like that feature, but like the overall, like in a year from now, what is this product going to do and be, and how, what is like the strategic direction of what it is that you're building, and how's that going to help your company? Like, why should they invest in building this product? How is that going to help the company move their needles, right? So and then you're prioritizing what you need to build. So you've got like a list of features that that you need, that's on your roadmap, but like when does this fit in? How how do I put that all together? And then you're rallying the team around all of that work. You're prioritizing the product features, capabilities, and then in a lot of cases, some product managers, depends on the organization, but you're in there helping to deliver that feature. So being that person that can help remove roadblocks, get people the answer the questions that they need, and really championing the team and letting them focus on the development work while you're chasing down answering their questions about the feature from commercial teams or operational teams of the business.
Yeah, I also feel like being the internal voice of the customer thing for product, right? Like you're always the litmus that's like, I've spent a lot of time getting into our customers' head, engineers, designers, whoever really, when you want to kind of, is this important to our customers? Like I'm a good lit to maybe kind of bounce off ideas with initially, right? And it doesn't mean you're always going to get it right, right? But I think for the most part, I always feel like, my product managers have always been the folks that are really kids for our customers inside the business, And it sucks because sometimes what your customers want isn't also what the business wants to do, right? So I think striking that balance, coming and negotiating with business, right? On like, hey, like, how can we make this work is something I've seen quite well. And so I'm just curious, like, at what point do you feel like, this art, right? So I think KBall alluded to it, like maybe some engineers haven't even worked to with a product manager directly, right? So this role has kind of birthed out of, bigger and, us wanting to create user experiences, and so like what's the kind of tipping point for product managers, right? And how do they fit into an org, and when can you, is there ever like a time where like a product manager isn't needed, like I'm just fairly new-ish role, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I've certainly been the only person developing the software where I was designing everything and trying to figure out what features to build, right? And doing all of it. Certainly the things that I designed as an engineer were nowhere near as fantastic as the stuff that you have a proper designer work on. And I think it's true for like for product management. I especially as an engineer, I didn't understand the economics behind what it was I was building or the why and or the industry really, because I've worked in gosh almost everything like games and finance, healthcare, agriculture, it just all these different industries, and I think that's as a product manager. For an engineer, you don't need to go too deep to understand that industry. You're just building software. You need to go deep on what tech stack you're working on. But for a
Mm-hmm.
product manager, you really need to go deep on that industry and understand that industry inside and out to give the
Mm-hmm.
best user experience, right? To
Right.
truly be able to understand your users and also understand like how do you bring value to this industry that no other competitor has.
Makes a lot of sense. I think the distinction between like technical expertise and domain expertise that's like specific to an industry is like key, right? And I think that's where maybe you see some teams getting away with the lack of a product manager, like, or a formalized role, because perhaps someone playing that like domain expert, right? And someone in that organization is saying, "Hey, I know this. This is what we should be building. Engineers, go do it," right? Um, and so, I think that's a distinction. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the, like, you mentioned the how and the what, right? So we've talked about this a lot in our industry, where like product folks are, responsible for the what, are responsible for the how, and that's the clear like line between these two disciplines that have to often work with each other, right? So if you ever want to know, hey, is this my job or something yourself? Is this a what or is this a how, right? And so like, has that distinction generally worked, and is it actually still even relevant with super agile organizations and moving projects? Like sometimes as a senior engineer, I'm having to often make that decision that maybe a product manager would. I'm not going to tap my product manager on the shoulder every 5 minutes. So
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this at the beginning of the call, right? Like I think a lot of it depends on the people and the relationships that you have. So, being that I'm a product manager that has come from engineering, um, I I'm the type of PM that is going to help you through that. But I think when you have someone who is maybe more of like an MBA type or someone who has more of a business standpoint, they're going to approach it a little differently. Um, so I can help you through a little bit of the how, whereas maybe someone with a business background can't. But they will be able to flex on those muscles, right, and be able to give you a lot more business strategic stuff. So I think I'm kind of coming around in a roundabout way, but a product manager has to be good at so many different things, right? You're working with design to create a product, you're working with to build it, and then you're working with the business to bring value. And all of those things you have to have some ability to do very well. And at any given time, you can flex on any of these different pieces, and it depends on if you're what is needed in the moment. So when you're working with a tech lead, there might be moments where the tech lead is taking on more of that producty role as they're trying to answer things on the fly, and get things done, especially if you're in an environment that has to get things done really quickly. I don't mind that when an engineer is trying to get it out the door, because we're all trying to ship things quickly and iterate on them and learn from that. But at the same time, I think it's helps that engineer if you understand very well the user that you're building for and why are you building this feature in the first place, and having the context of all the user research. If you have the context around it, then I think the engineer can make so much better decisions. Like, I trust that engineers can make better decisions when they understand that and can kind of make those micro decisions.
Liana, you said something there that I want to double click in on a little bit, which is you mentioned the word why, right? I think, the what is often a collaborative endeavor between product, between maybe the tech leads, maybe the design leads, whoever it might be. But to me, what sets a really good product manager apart is they always have that context. They always have that why. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to decide on this what? Once we've decided on the what's, why are we doing it now instead of later? And why are we doing this what instead of that what? All of those different pieces live somewhere, and it's the product manager that, in my mind, pulls all those pieces together.
That's right. I mean, I think that's the vision that I was mentioning earlier. I have to have a vision in my mind that I'm communicating out to everyone uh, multiple times, over and over again, right? Like, so that everyone continues to carry that picture of what we're building, and why we're building it. That's where user research is just really a cornerstone of product management. You need to be understanding what's going on with the folks you're building for, and why they need that thing. Why is it important? What kind of value does it bring to their life? So that you're building the right thing. And as long if you can carry that vision to everyone else, and let them understand where's the user coming from, why do they care about this feature, then those smaller decisions are easier for folks to make. But yeah, I think we run. I like to do something called a story time at another company. We called it a user goal meeting, and it's a meeting before you even solutionize anything, before you create mock-ups or designs. You come to that meeting with a bunch of user research and a problem to solve, and you get everyone in the room. And when I mean everyone, like every stakeholder, that's engineers, content writers, um, any medical folks, or like stakeholders, like folks who that know about like the industry. um, Put them all in a room, and share the user research that you have around this problem. But let's agree on the problem. Let's all just agree on, like, this month we're going to tackle this problem, and get agreement there, and an understanding with the user research around what is that problem. And then at that point, now we start thinking about, all right, as a user who to solve this problem, what do I want? What is the goal? What as a user I want uh, XYZ to satisfy, to fix that problem. And we'll step through a bunch of list of I wants. And it sounds a lot like user stories, right? That's what you're getting at, is like trying to kind of understand the goals of what you're trying to accomplish with this feature. And when you do that with everybody in a room, you're not only like outlining all of these goals that you can eventually use on stories, but you're getting a shared context between all of these stakeholders around what the problem is and what the goals are, so that everyone walks away understanding the complete context around what you're going to build. So that's the point when I go away with this designer, start working on mock-ups and ideas. And then when we bring that back to the team, we're talking about these are the goals, and we might not like hit every single one that we identified in the meeting, but like we'll prioritize like the most important ones, and point to, like, here in the design is where that's reflected. And then you're having much better discussions at that design review, because everyone already has that context. And then once you break that out and folks are going off to engineer that, like I can go move on to the next feature and get that queued up for folks while they're working on the first piece. But I can trust that my tech leads and everyone has really good idea around what it is that we're building. And when I skip that step, every time I've ever skipped that step, you suffer at the other end. Like you you end up spending more time communicating that why to folks because things weren't right, or there's confusion, or folks don't know what they're building, and it's always a problem. So don't, it's never worth it to skip that step. It's really important.
Okay, cool. We're gonna break here. That was like a perfect ending. That's awesome. So I think for the next segment we can piggyback star of why, and I'd love to hear like, I don't know, I kind of want to segue into like intersectionality, being helpful, but I also am curious about like challenges where like when things go wrong, when our engineers like more harmful than helpful on the product side. But I don't know, KBall, what do you think?
We should just be cognizant of the fact we have a largely engineering audience. So make sure that we're,
That's true.
I think it's worth highlighting like good and bad ways to get involved in product, but let's sort of position it such that it will be
yeah, it'll be like yes, it won't be like
well, just so that folks can hear it, right? Like you can be a little blunt, but don't lay blame, right?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. All right, so Liana, do you need a break? Oh,
engineers and dudes, for all they like to say they're not emotional, are very emotional, and like,
oh my God, totally.
if you start with blaming, like, or not blaming, but like, you can make it hard for them to hear things.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's so funny that I've never really connected those dots, but yeah, I'd say engineers and dudes are highly emotional, even though they're like marketed as like completely like unemotional,
Well,
where
sort
does
of
that come from? It's such a lie.
well, there's a societal and cultural pressure on it, which then leads dudes to say I can't be emotional, so then they don't ever like learn about their own emotions.
Yeah, right.
Plus, we don't. I think a lot of men express emotion as anger, even when the underlying things may not start as anger. And we don't treat anger, and especially male anger, in the same way that we treat other emotions.
Yeah,
As a society.
Yeah, honestly, topic in itself, it's fascinating. Okay, well, while you were talking, I think I figured out my jump point. So I'm gonna basically North Star with your intersectionality, and I'm curious to see like how you as an engineer, like how does your engineering background help you like like in a stronger way?
When we were talking about intersectionality, I assumed that you meant like how did the theater help me in product management? Because
I'd love to go into that, because I actually, as somebody who has a dance and to a lesser extent theater background, I think that it's tremendously helpful to have some amount of arts as you start to move from being purely in engineering to bridging between different roles. But
so many musicians in software, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild actually. Yeah, I think internet you functionality to be that, so it should be whatever you like dealer's choice. So my bias led me to engineer product hybrid, and you're like, no, I'm actually an engineer artsy product hybrid, like so yeah,
I like to mush all the things together. I love mashups, one of my favorite things in the world. So yeah, I mean, I'll talk about all of it, honestly. Like with theater was incredibly helpful to me as an engineer. And
Amal wants to formally us off.
We're still in break mode. So I was going to say save your thought. Yes. Okay. So sorry. So you don't need a sip of water or to use the restroom or anything. No, we can get started. Okay, we are going to roll. So yes, water is good. All right. So Liana, that was fascinating. That was a really good breakdown of like how to do product well. I think that the why reasoning that you and KBall were kind of ripping off of was really cool. I'm really curious to know like how does the why like help you like in the way that you explain a product, but I'm curious, like, does your intersectionality affect the why? Like I feel like you're a theater person, you're an engineer, there's so much, your intersectionality, does that help you kind of tell a better story to engineers?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Certainly, my software background helps me communicate with engineers more effectively. But I did want to talk about my theater background and how that helps because it absolutely has helped me in my career, both as a software engineer and as a product manager. Because, I mean, obviously, I'm someone who can speak well. I enjoy speaking in front of large groups. I enjoy singing in front of large groups. So I have no fear in front of chatting with folks. And that is kind of what led me from making that step from engineering to product management. So definitely the oral communication skills were important, but also like the problem solving that has to happen, like and being kind of quick on your feet. I will not say I'm the quickest person on my feet, but when a problem arises, you have to deal with it in the moment and be very present. I was just telling this story actually to my son, which is kind of funny. I think we're all familiar with West Side Story. The movie is kind of another remake of the movie is coming out soon. I was in a production where, if you're familiar with the story, Chino comes out with a gun and kills Tony, and Maria like has a whole monologue about the gun. And there was one night where a prop person put the gun away. Chino could not find the gun, and instead of maybe a couple of things he could have possibly have done in that moment, but he was panicking and he grabbed the knife from Act One and stabbed Tony. So Maria's left with the knife going, every single line I have after this is about shooting people. What do I do? So she had to think on her feet, and we all had to just kind of run with it and be present. And I was never more present than I was in that moment because, like, what is she gonna do? But yeah, it was all like, I think the lines are, how many bullets are left in this gun, Chino? Enough for you, enough for you. So she's like, how many people can I stab, Tony? Yeah, it was just ridiculous. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment in theater where everybody was just like, why did you change the ending? But I think that ability to think on your feet and be willing to roll with the punches and be flexible is just so important in life and in your job, and also being willing to laugh about it, and things go wrong, and what are you going to do about it? I think your reaction in those moments are super important.
There's some fundamental lessons there too. So I've done nowhere near to the level that you have, but I've done a fair amount of improv theater and things around that. And some of the lessons around essentially everything is about relationships, right? We and think especially engineers tend to fixate on on the concrete objects and the things that we are building, but the way that the work gets done is about the relationships and the interactions and who's talking to whom and how are you co-defining this thing. And like working in theater and the arts, like that teaches that like nothing that I've ever seen.
Absolutely. I love that idea of co-defining, because that's how I enjoy working with anyone. It's a very collaborative environment, because that's how you get the best stuff. And when you're working in an environment of trust and everyone's working together, and that's not to say that we're not passionate and don't have opinions, and voices might not be raised, but it's all in service of what you're building together, and you can all be proud of it. And that's what makes me love building software.
Yeah, it's almost like you knew what I wanted to talk about next, Liana, because I really, you kind of hit on this really important, right? So I'm really curious about like what makes for, I mean, and I can, I'm not saying this because, is my friend, but really, Liana, you are one of the best product managers I've you're really well organized, you're able to like relay information. You never I would say you almost like you give us almost too much information, in the sense that like there's never a stone you leave unturned, which I love, because everything you put together is always going to be a good resource while the project is going on. And I feel like you're incredible at that. And so I'm curious, like, product manager, and also, you know, this, you know, your theater background, your engineering background, I think have helped you build empathy in different ways as well. So I'm just curious, what's the secret sauce to like a good PM?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to our relationship and some of the things that we worked on, Mel, it really was about me putting myself in the shoes of the engineer. Like, what would I need to know if I were building this, and what would I want to know? So that really helps a lot. The types of questions, like if I were staring at a blank screen, what kind of questions would I have? So that's how I start, and then definitely am someone who is documenting the heck out of everything. And I think we use Confluence at my job right now, which is, I know people have a love-hate with that tool. I really actually enjoy using any tool where I can just organize my thoughts, because if I can put that down on paper, I'm not really great like thinking on my feet when I speak, but I certainly can write a good damn paper, and and that's where I think I get it's helpful to me to put my thoughts down and organize them just to for my own self, and then you've got a document that you can share around with other folks. So I think definitely having starting to collect materials that are helpful is an important part of being a PM. Yeah. Well, I mean, those things get out of date so quickly and whatnot, but in the moment, yeah. I mean, I've written so many pieces of collateral. It's ridiculous, and I mean, they're gone in the ethers. It would be cool to look back on my life when I'm 90 to go like look at how many pieces did I like. One pagers did I write over my lifetime? It's ridiculous, but at the time it helps me collect my thoughts and communicate them out to other folks. And I love the collaborative nature of some of these tools now that we didn't have like 10-20 years ago. It's great, like where you can folks making comments and changes, and you just kind of work async on a document and come into like what's the word, not collaborative, but
Shared
everyone, yeah,
understanding.
shared, yeah, a shared vision, a shared communication around what it is that you're doing. I think I went off track of your question
Yeah,
there.
no, you don't. No, you know that. I think, yeah. I mean, I certainly think like having like resource material, source of truth, even though it might get irrelevant later, but I think having people to at any given time is like, here, look at this. That's very helpful, I find. And so like, what are some of your biggest challenges? I'd say, you know, what's really hard about being a PM, you know, on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis, month basis. But I'm curious
Yeah, I think
what's hard.
Actually, before we go there, can I hijack slightly and go a
Oh,
little deeper on one of the things?
hijack a
Yeah.
call.
Well, so some of the stuff you were talking about, it got me thinking about this sort of core challenge, I think, of being a PM and working well. So, and especially highlighted, I think we were talking earlier about how much of a planner you are. And I think a lot of what product managers end up doing is planning and documenting and pulling everything together. But I think one of the really interesting challenges there, and I say this as someone who is not a good planner, is how do you do that planning and coalescing while still leaving room for co-creation in the moment, right? So we're going down this, we've created all these things, we have this big plan, and suddenly, for example, a tech lead says, hey, you know, if we do this piece of work that you've already highlighted here, that actually opens up this whole additional set of things that we could do. How do you kind of manage like the divergent pieces while still trying to converge back to a coherent source of truth and plan?
that's a fantastic question, right? It's the difference between waterfall and agile, right?
I feel like it's also a polite way of saying like, how do you herd the nerds back to the right direction when they're like going 100
Well,
different ways?
yes and no, right? Because I think that sometimes
It's not
those
even.
diversions or those new possibilities, that's where the magic ends up being.
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, I think, I mean, we have in software, we have rituals, right? We have the daily stand up, we have grooming sessions, retros, and that's a process, right? Having a strong product process is where the rigidity is, but it allows for the creativity. So, for example, that story time meeting is super important. That's that moment where we get to do that kind of brainstorming and just let ourselves go wild, right? With all kinds of our different ideas, what might the user want, and start to really be creative. And then we go away and I go with my designer, and then we start to kind of confine that a little bit more. And I had one of my favorite designers that I ever worked with. She would call her design, her dream Barbie design would be, she would take the feature and like build out this not just the feature, but how should this entire section of the application look and feel, and what might all of it, if I had unlimited time and resources and abilities, what could I build? And that's what we would start with. Like, okay, we've got all this magic. And then we would bring that to the tech lead and go, okay, but we've got a month to build this. So, what does that look like? If you were only given a month, what pieces of this are the most important pieces for us to tease out of it? And so it's kind of a push and pull. It's like allowing people to be creative and expand out, but then reining them back in again and out and in. So from an engineering standpoint, like I will carve out pieces of the Dream Barbie design, and we'll focus on that piece, but then we'll go into grooming and like talk about the different ways you might architect that and what might it look like, and have those broader conversations that would start to lead to, well, gosh, we could architect this thing and I need to refactor that, and all of those, and which are really important, necessary conversations. And then we come back to the time box. It's like, okay, given these are things that we want to do, and let's keep those in mind, and I'll find places to archive like those ideas so that we don't let go of them. But like, okay, now, in the time box, what can we reasonably achieve given this broader vision? But if you don't have that broader vision and you're only focused on the small thing, you never get a chance to innovate or be creative, and you're never building, like, you're building the okay thing, but not the awesome thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think like for me, I can tell you that as an engineer, I always want as much context as possible, right? So the design is like what I want to know. I'm like, I want to know, where are we trying to go now, but I also want to know, where would we like to be next year? Because I think for me, when I'm, when you're in the cloud and you're making those like you can design with tomorrow in mind, right? So you don't have to build this rigid system where you're coding everything to be statically,
100%.
Statically for today. Like, how do I make this an open design that's extensible? And I think having that context is really important. And that comes from, again, working with a good product manager that like is able to share, like, hey, here's where what of constraints. And again, constraints are super important and healthy. You're going to hopefully be building tomorrow. And so don't make the code that you're building today, don't make it difficult to get to the next place tomorrow, right?
Context.
Well, and to Liana's point, be agile about it too. Imagine you're going to revisit, because one of my favorite things about software is when I build a piece of software and people start using it and it uncovers the fact that it is incomplete, right? Our vision may have been complete in and itself. We built this thing, but when people get their hands on it, they start to get excited and they say, oh, wait, what if we could do this? Can I do this with it? Can I do this with it? Can we make it do this? Like, that is successful software that the act of using it is driving new ideas for how to improve it. But that's like changing your Barbie house and saying, okay, like, my Barbie house is beautiful, but it needs a turret over here now that I've played with this part of it, right? Like, how do we keep moving and iterating on that vision?
Well, that's why you should never actually build the dream Barbie house, honestly. You should have the dream in your head, but the dream is going to morph and change over time as you build different pieces. So yeah, eventually there could be a turret and a moat.
And a moat. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I'm really liking this concept of like constraints but leaving room for, but then also not leaving too much room, like there's so many different factors here that it seems like this is like baking or something, like we're making cookie or something, or like we're trying to make a meringue, the balance of the science correct. But it really
it's organic, right? We're creating a garden or something.
Right,
we're growing things. Some things will go as we plan them, and some things will develop turrets.
And this isn't dreamy sorts of things. I mean, this is how you can build software. This is what I did at the MBTA. We knew that at the time when I joined, the website had been really just needed a lot of help. It hadn't been revisited in a lot of areas. We really needed to touch every single area. so much to do. It's just like, oh, there's so much. Where do you even start, right? But after creating like a roadmap and time boxing things, it's like we don't have to get at 100% or make everything perfect all at once. Let's just get like the best 80% out of it, or just how far, given that time box is, I'm doing this with my hands, making a little box, with that time box, like how far could we get? And if we solve enough of the problem that we were trying to correct, let's move on to the next thing that's on fire and the next thing. And so you're doing what you can given the constraints that you have, but keeping this dream Barbie vision in your head and moving along, and you'll be surprised at the end of a year, or even less than that. Like when you look back, I love doing retros and like, here's, what did you do over the last year? Because you'd be shocked. Like, I'm always shocked at like how much were we able to accomplish in that last year just by, being focused and keeping this vision in our heads and trotting along. And certainly it's a painting that is never complete, but it's a pretty damn fine painting by the end of the year. And certainly there's more that you're always going to want to do, but as long as you're pretty methodical and careful about solving as much of the problem as you can, given what you have, it's amazing what you can accomplish.
Okay. So I think I have a perfect segue into this, which is like backlog management, because like nothing is ever done, right? So I'm curious, when do we want to fit in the song? Or do we want to leave that as an Easter egg? Do we want to like record that as a separate Easter egg at the end of the podcast? Because the KBall, if you click on the link for lyrics.
I don't have permission.
Oh. I can fix that. But I also have video with it, because you said that there was a video element to it. So what I can do is record it so that it's just a MP4 or 4 or something like that with
You'll record it like separately and figure out how to fit it in. We'll release it maybe on the YouTube channel, and then we'll Easter.
Sure.
That sounds great. Okay, good. Because
I'd like to do it for you later, just for fun.
Juicy conversation. I want to cut it into our time slot. Okay. Water breaks, anything? Are we good to roll in?
I'm gonna take the water
discussions. Okay.
All set.
Okay. So, all right. So I'll kick off with backlog management, and then we can see where the conversation. Point I would love to get to talking about how and into products from engineering, just like for folks who are interested, and things that you found helpful. But if you take us there, I will not be upset. So, all right. So
you invited me, and you knew I was going to hijack things.
Oh no, okay. Welcome, hijack. Remember, this is like the magic. This is where the magic happens, right? Is being open to nudges. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to center myself. All right, Liana, that was pretty magical, if I say so myself. I think this whole concept of like of chunks and never being done is like really the core thesis of software development. And I'm really curious, like how you deal with never being perfect, never being done, right? Like software is this living, breathing thing, and it's never, ever done, right? Unit test you could write. There's always another thing other language that you could translate and add to your website, right? There's so many things. And so how do you deal with that backlog management? But also like, how do you deal with focus as well, right? Because, backlog management is this focus exercise, right? And so figure out what the most important thing that you need to work on next is. Balance that with like tech debt and all these other competing priorities. So I'm curious.
Yeah, great questions. I mean, I think it's not an easy thing to keep space in your plan for refactoring. It's not an easy sell to the business, but it's definitely, having come from the engineering background, it's something that I always try to make space for and make room for, because if you don't, I think I liken it to like a chef in a kitchen, right? If you're cooking and you leave all the pots and pans around, like eventually you won't have any pots and pans left, and it's all dirty and it's a big old mess, and you're gonna have to clean it up at some point, right? And that's appropriate when you're trying to whip up something quickly, like a prototype, to see, is anyone even going to eat this cake? But at the end of the day, at some point, you've got to clean up after yourself. And if you want to have some code that you're going to maintain or keep over time, if you're cleaning as you go along, it's just an easier and a better time for everyone. I was a Girl Scout back in the day, so it was always leave the place better than you found it. It was one of our mottos. So that's when you're touching a piece of code, that's when you refactor it.
Yeah, no,
So
I couldn't agree with you more. And like brushing your teeth every day versus like once a month, big difference. Like once a month for like an hour is not the same as like every day for 2 minutes, right? Like, so
important to leave space for product managers to keep in mind that they need to make space for refactoring. And one thing I like to do, which is it's always a hard sell, but I will sell it no matter what, is that December should never be a month where you're shipping features. Like, I just don't believe that. We're all in holiday mode. Folks are like focused on other things. It is the perfect month to be thinking about a refactor palooza. Like, let's just take all of the things that have been annoying us all year, or the backlog that is accrued over time, and just, kill it throughout the month of December. And inevitably, there's always some small feature or some need that the business needs at the end of the year. Always, always. But I try to like slim it down or keep it as small as possible so that we're making space for that. But I don't just wait until December, honestly. If we finish a feature early, or we get to a good stopping place in our time box and there's room left for refactoring, I will, I let folks do that. But I think when we're building our estimates or trying to figure out what we're going to accomplish in the time box, we're always having a conversation of, okay, what areas of the code are we touching, and how can we refactor that, and how can we fit that in as part of what we're doing? Because that is part of building a new feature, is fixing what was left behind and making it better. Like, that is part of that back end cleanup, is part of building the front end feature.
Question related to that. So there's kind of a couple fundamental layers that one could take that, right? There's this ongoing maintenance, refactoring. This thing didn't get quite done, or didn't get quite cleaned up, or we were in a rush. And those, like, I think, leaving some space between projects. We're planning an infrastructure week, that type of thing. That's a great way to deal with that, is just leaving space, leaving breath. When you finish early, like that ever happens in engineering, then you have time. But the question I have for you is how you think about prioritizing sort of larger scale changes, right? An issue has come up that something similar keeps happening over and over again, and it's starting to look like actually our like infrastructure under this feature is not good enough, or we need to pull in or create a new system to handle a whole class of problems. It's not going to be feature facing. It's not something that's actually going to deliver immediate business value, at least in a way that the business is used to thinking about it. But it's going to take, let's say, a solid month, a full project of this engineering team, or it's going to take some other time. How do you think about prioritizing those types of projects relative to business features?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on the answer partially there in the question. It's that you need to find what the business value is of that work, because if there is no value to the business, there isn't a point in doing it. So why is it valuable to do refactoring work? Why is it valuable to build out the infrastructure in a better way, or in a new way? And what value is that going to bring? How much development speed, comes out of that? How much money are you saving because now you're not paying for third-party services, like things like that. We did some work at MBTA where we had been using Google Maps, and they're incredibly expensive, and we wanted to swap to using something that was open source, that was free, but it was a big project that was spanning a large amount of time. But it was an easy sell because I'm like, hey, I'm going to save you $10,000. Can you give me some time to do that? I'm like, sure. So when you can add the financial value there, or like the benefit to eventually to the user, and make that apparent, that makes selling those projects easy. And I think it's easy to sell too on Refactor Me. I think the business never says, no, please don't refactor and make code beautiful. It's just, they just don't understand the value of why that's important. So I like to work for organizations you that and understand why that's important. Certainly, there is a balance between everything being perfect and beautiful in code and having no value to the user, right? You've got to just balance those things. But that's why they say like PMing is kind of like juggling, right? You've got to kind of juggle all of these different priorities and concerns at the same time. But that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, I mean, juggling knives, I would say, while being in the air, moving 100 miles an hour, like, you know, up and down. It's a hard job.
Wait, were we
at
gonna just
the
start selling
spear.
people on moving into this, and now you're
Yeah,
sitting
yeah,
and
no, yeah,
stretching
yeah, sorry,
knives
yes.
and-
No, PMing is
I
great.
mean,
Yes, while juggling flowers
always
and
nice.
sitting in front of
Sometimes-
roses, getting your feet massaged. No, actually, hold on. Well, this point that you're making about like, yeah, tech to kind of tie it to the business value, right? It's like, how does business value, how does this help our customers? I'm totally with you, but I don't think it's necessarily an organizational thing though, because that I think are maybe more engineering or business oriented will understand the value of tech debt. They will understand the value of testing and understand the value of software, and being able to obviously ship without breaking things, right? However, like, I think and I think the marketing problem is actually on the engineering side, because I think people say, yeah, I need to refactor this because, but like what they should really be saying, I need to refactor this because, you know, this is slowing down every single release of ours, you know, and which means that our wait this much longer to get a feature or whatever. I think the framing is on us as engineers to make sure that we understand how this ties into business value. And quite frankly, like, explain that, then should you be working on it at all, especially at like at work. So if you can't find
many engineers are bad storytellers, but the good ones maybe should go into product management.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
That's the going trend, you know, KBall.
But those are the questions that I ask an engineer when they want to refactor something, like, oh, this thing is bugging me. Well, why is it bugging you? Oh, because I can't do X, Y, Z. Well, you know, great. Like, let's expand on that. Or if they want to work on something like, this is such really cool and it'd be really cool. Great. Like, what, you know, why is that? What kind of value would that bring? Like, what if you were me and you had to tell the CEO that you were going to spend your month working on this, what should I tell them? And usually even just asking that question, lots of times folks just don't even think about that. Like, oh yeah, if I were to talk to someone about why I'm building this, you know, and then they tell me, fine, like, and I can put that into a story to sell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's funny about that is like, I think there's the exercise of the 5 whys. As a product manager, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, right? But if you just kind of ask why 5 times, like for every answer, okay, I need to do this. Okay, why? Because I need to do this. By the 5th why, the theory is sometimes before that she'll get for that, but sometimes by the 5th why, you kind of really get to the core of the problem, right? And I feel like that is so much of product management, is really kind of sussing out like, why is this really broken? Experiences like of product managers I've worked with, like we need to do this, and this, and da da da. And they get me to kind of understand why we can't do it now, just by asking me why, right? Like, and reminding me like the ability of like knowing what the most important thing to do is, and understanding like, how does this actually help us with our current objectives, right? Because there's lots of things you can do that's important, especially at a startup. But especially in a startup environment, though, you need to find like, what's the right 5 things I should be doing right now, right? Because it's not like what you should be doing is like right. Yeah, you know, and that's tough. It's a really tough thing. It's not easy to find the right thing to do at any given moment. And I think we help you refine it, you know?
Yeah, you mentioned, you reminded me, like, they say that a project manager's job is to say no to and
Yeah.
protect the team. But I try not to ever say no. I don't say no. I ask the whys, like, why is this important? And are you willing to sacrifice A for B? Like, hey, we have a plan, and how important is this to you and to the business, and what value is it bringing? And is it more valuable than what we're working on right now? And sometimes the answer is yes. We got to drop everything and do that thing because it would be just so beneficial to the company to do that. But more often than not, it's like, oh, well, you know what? We have that planned and we're going to put that in the backlog and we're going to do that later because that's where it fits. But that constant revising and revisiting of the roadmap is what being agile is about, right? Like, you learn things over time, you learn what's important over time, and that's how you prioritize things. Oh, my phone is going crazy.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
So if one of our listeners is listening to this and thinking, well, that sounds kind of interesting. Like, how do you know if you should investigate being a product manager? Say you're an engineer, maybe you've been working in engineering 5 years, 3 years. I mean, let's face it, most folks haven't been in the industry that long yet. Like, how do you know, hey, I should actually go and think about becoming a product manager?
Well, so I made Amal a list of, you're a PM if, and a bunch of statements. That said, though, before I launch into that, I will say that if you're a software engineer, stay in software engineering for as long as you can, because that experience is invaluable.
This is counter to the advice I thought we'd be getting, Liana.
I mean, before I made the transition, I'd been doing software for nearly 20 years, and I have a lot of experience and stories that I can draw back on for my product management. But not that you should wait 20 years to become a product manager, but certainly all of that experience is really helpful. And the more engineering experience you have, the more helpful it is. But let's say you've been in the field for a number of years and you're looking for your next challenge, right? So if you're the type of person who likes to know what features are on the roadmap, you might be a product manager. If you're questioning why the new feature is going to be useful, like, that's a clue. If you like to understand the problem that a feature is trying to solve, and if you like to be involved in defining the solutions, if you care about the quality of the customer experience as well as the quality of the code, you might be a product manager. If you love measuring success with quantifiable analytics and you don't mind talking with users and other stakeholders, if you make sure the conversations that get alignment across teams happen, you're the glue, and you might be a product manager. And if you're comfortable with the 80-20 rule and can solve for the most common use cases and balance the trade-offs and edge cases, if you have a calm and upbeat demeanor, even when chaos swirls around you, you might be a product manager.
Okay, but say I said yes to all of those things and I'm not a product manager. Like, asking for a friend here, what might I know that would say I shouldn't be a product manager?
Yeah, if you're I guess, well, do you want to do it? I mean, if you don't,
I was like, I'm hiring.
They say that, like, it's like the hottest new job, I guess, in Silicon Valley is to become PM. I'm like, really? I mean,
What?
I don't know.
Actually, you know what's so funny? I have this in my show notes, but like apparently the hottest new job at business school, at like people getting an MBA, is product manager. You know, they're actually less and less interested in entrepreneurship these days. How do I be a PM at Facebook? How do I be a PM at Google? You know, that these business grads are like more interested in becoming than starting a business. Like, so.
Well, actually, that makes sense to me. I mean, if you're coming from a
less risk.
business background, that makes sense to me. If you're coming from an engineering software background, it makes a little less sense to me because, I mean, honestly, I miss programming. I miss it a lot. It was just really fun, and I don't get to do as much of it, any of it. I still have my GitHub account and will peek into people's PRs and sometimes make a comment, which is usually just a thumbs up these days. But yeah, I do miss it, and I think it's a harder. I don't know. If you're a software engineer who just really enjoys making software and talking to different areas of business and pulling people together, and that's you find that you're making less and less code and you don't mind, then that might be a clue, right? That you're okay with making the switch over. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it makes
People
sense.
come to product management. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, no. I was just gonna say that it makes sense actually because there's a big overlap also between and product managers. And I think KBall, we were discussing this with KBall earlier, but basically there's, we kind of almost have of like, when is it a product manager's role, engineering, like, person on the team's role, right? So there's
That is a
a little bit
great
of a gray
topic.
area Venn diagram.
Yeah, when I was brought into product management, the product managers were incredibly technical and very deeply embedded in the teams. And yet, when I moved on from that role to other companies, the reverse was true. The expectation was on the tech lead to take on a lot of that product owner, project management piece of it. So much so that I wasn't even I wasn't expected to write tickets or even attend stand-ups, which I think is crazy. Like, I need to know what's happening and what's going on, and I think the only way to keep things on the rails is to understand what people are building, and answer questions at stand up. Like, I just can't imagine not showing up for that. But it really depends on the organization and also the people involved. Like, there are some tech leads that I can absolutely trust with that, and I can walk away and go focus on more strategic stuff. It really depends on the situation. But who should do what? It's very cultural, around ownership and where those lines are drawn.
People come to product management from a variety of fields, right? I've seen, I mean, your background, right? Folks come from engineering. I've seen PMs who come from a design background. We were just talking about PMs coming from a business background, and actually, one of the PMs I work with now, who's phenomenal, is coming from like a behavioral science background.
Ooh,
So
fancy.
I'm kind of curious what you see as like the advantages of coming from an engineering background, because many of our audience are engineers, but also maybe what are the blind spots or challenges you might have coming into product management from an engineering background, and how would you go about remedying them?
Absolutely. Like, coming from an engineering standpoint, I was able to hit the ground running on so many things in product management. It was great, and a lot of engineers do make that switch because I understand how to break apart a story, how to communicate to engineers and help them build the right thing. Like, that's awesome. But where my blind spots are, and I've had to learn this over time, and it's been difficult, is that business side, right? I don't have an MBA. Don't really want to get an MBA, but I
It's okay.
have to.
This is a safe space. Like, high likelihood that nobody listening to this. I mean, very
I don't
few
want to
people.
insult anyone who has an MBA. Actually, if you are an engineer with an MBA, like that is a fantastic resume builder, just a fantastic thing to have. But you don't.
Person on this call that wants an MBA. Actually, I don't want a real MBA. I want an SDM. But anyways, I'll
Yeah,
put a link to the show notes to the program that I want to join.
there's actually one you can get now, that there's MBAs you can get that are software management focused, that are, that I might be interested in, actually. But the the skills that you're trying to flex there are, understanding your industry, understanding, like, can you figure out how much do you charge for your product? How do you figure out what kind of team that you need, and how do you pay for that team? Like, how much is that team going to cost? How much is a project going to cost? And how many people do you need? And how much is all that going to cost? Like, a lot of that folks. And then there's the marketing side. So there's the business side, but then there's the marketing. Like, okay, how do you build a go to market? How do you let people know about this piece of software that you've built, and train your commercial teams, your operation teams, your users how to use this feature? All of that is kind of more like salesy marketing stuff that it's been very difficult for me to pick that up over time, just because that's just not where my brain space is. So I'm constantly like trying to challenge myself to be thinking in those terms, because it just doesn't come natural to me.
Yeah, I can totally see it as a huge mental shift. And quite frankly, it's like the deterrent for me when it comes to product. Like really, I enjoy making slides. I don't enjoy having to constantly pitch, and I don't enjoy documentation, which is a key thing that you need to do as a product manager, because otherwise, you know, the cats will.
As a tech lead too, though, don't you think? Like tech leads need to
Pardon?
write architectural documents, right?
Let's put it this way: it's the least favorite. It's the least favorite. Like it's the least. I don't know. I guess the thing that the least about my job is like having to, you know, I would much rather like, can I just like put this into an audio doc and then like somebody else like type it up for me, because you know it's anyways. So, but yeah, I mean it's
I totally
it's a
hear
hard.
you, Amal. I love a lot of things about product. I love collaborating with product folks, and I'm not enough of a planner or an organizer to be an excellent product manager. I partner really well with those folks, but
Mhm.
like, yeah, that is
Yeah,
there's a
that's the
lot.
space that I'm in. Yeah, I want to. I'm a really good partner, I think, and I think, you know, trust is
You
important
are a
because, you
really
know,
good
you.
partner, Mel.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. You know, but like, you know, you have to be able to lean on each other and trust each other and understand like when it's that other person's job, when it's your job, and you know, and so that's like the relationship I think between the tech lead and the PM. But so Liana, like, you know, this has been a really insightful and a really interesting discussion. I wanted to say, you know, thank you so much for all of the insights, and I think we have an Easter egg surprise. I'm not sure where we're going to insert it, but let's just put it this way: Liana is a singer. She
We have a history of incorporating singing in our podcast, though most of us are not nearly as talented as I think Liana is.
Well,
Yeah.
I told you that I like mashups, so it's really important. It's always been important to me to like bring all my passions together. So I tend to sing about tech issues or like technical things or just goofy technical things. So I'll leave it at that.
Exactly. And she, you know, let's just say the surprise Easter egg is something about Unix and singing, and I'll leave it at that.
And a very old and tired meme.
An old and tired meme. Yes, that.
Ooh, I'm
But
excited.
anyways, Liana,
I haven't seen
so
this.
yeah, connect with you on the internet, and where can folks find you?
Oh, I'm L Leahy on Twitter and liana.org. I got that back in 1995.
Yeah,
So you can find
to
me there.
realize like, yeah, like you are like Liana. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Eternals. Like this is like a new Marvel spin-off, but there are these people who live forever, and they all three. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how long I can pull that off for.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. And
Thank
we hope to have
you.
you back on the show in the future. And everyone, have a wonderful. Take care. Web love it.
So good.
Like twice. I was like, what's the outro song? This isn't gonna be an actual show.